You know that horrible feeling of being judged solely by your appearance? Of someone with power looking you up and down and treating you like you're nothing? It's a pain that leaves us feeling small and voiceless. Now imagine that person is a police officer trying to humiliate you on the side of the road. What would you do? The story you're about to hear is about a truck driver who went through exactly that. But what the police officer didn't know was that he had just messed with the wrong person. Very wrong got, so are you ready to see how this chase ends? Before we hit the road with Agent Elena, do us a quick favor and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Trust us, you won't want to miss the other incredible stories of justice coming your way. You know those endless highways that crisscross the United States, those ribbons of asphalt stretching across deserts and mountains. They represent freedom. For many, but for some, they hide a dark secret, a kind of injustice that happens far from the city's view. This is the story of how that secret was exposed by a woman no one would ever suspect. Picture the scene: a lone trucker behind the wheel of a massive purple Peterbilt, a truck so unique it turned heads at every stop. Her name was Elena, and to all the other drivers and gas station attendants, she was just another road professional, someone who knew the engine's roar better than their own voice. With her hair tied back and her hands firmly on the wheel, she was the picture of competence and courage, a woman unafraid to master an 18-wheeler. But behind that facade lay a much deeper and more dangerous truth. Elena was no ordinary trucker. In fact, she wasn't a trucker at all. She was Special Agent Elena Vance, one of the FBI's sharpest investigators, specializing in dismantling corruption within law enforcement itself. Her current mission was one of the riskiest of her career, infiltrating the heart of the system that was supposed to protect citizens and exposing the wolves in sheep's clothing. For months, the FBI had been receiving a flood of anonymous tips from truck drivers along busy Interstate 80, especially along the stretch that cuts through Wyoming. The stories were eerily similar. Honest men and women, family men and women, being stopped by a specific group of state highway patrol officers and systematically intimidated, humiliated, and extorted. Trumped-up tickets, threats of vehicle impoundment, all to force cash payments that went straight into the officers' pockets. But they were just words, accounts from people too scared to show their faces. Justice needed more, needed irrefutable evidence. And that's why Elena was there. She knew that to catch these men, she couldn't operate from a Washington office. She needed to smell their diesel, sense the fear they instilled, and be the perfect bait. And then, on a long, lonely afternoon, with the immense Wyoming sky stretching out above her, her moment finally arrived. She saw the flashing lights in her rearview mirror, a flash of red and blue against the gray asphalt. And she knew her secret. Mission was about to be put to the test in the most brutal way possible. That flash of red and blue didn't strike fear in Elena's heart. It provoked an icy calm, the calm of a predator who's just seen its prey enter its trap. She maneuvered her massive Peterbilt onto the shoulder with a smoothness that belied its size, the Wyoming dust rising in a slow cloud. Every movement was deliberate, every second part of the plan. She cut the engine, the sudden silence of the cabin amplifying the steady pounding of her own heart. She wasn't nervous, she was ready. This was what she trained for. This was why. She was here. She climbed out of the cab, landing on the ground with an athlete's ease. The highway patrolman approached with an arrogant stride, his chin high, his mirrored sunglasses hiding his eyes but not his contempt. He stopped a few feet away, looking her up and down, first at her, then at the shiny purple truck, a sneer forming on his face. His voice cut through the air, thick with an arrogance he didn't even try to hide. He said, "Well, what do we have here? Little girl, are you sure you can handle such a big truck? Show me your license and registration." and opened the trailer. Now, Elena kept her expression neutral, handing over the documents with a steady hand. She had rehearsed this scene in her mind 100 times. She replied, "The trailer is empty, sir. I just dropped off a load in Cheyenne." His response was a laugh, a harsh, mocking sound that echoed in the open space. "Of course you are," he said. "You're just trying to get attention with this doll truck, aren't you? Trying to get famous on TikTok?" Every word was a knife, designed to diminish, to humiliate. Elena felt the blood heat in her veins, but her face remained a mask of calm. She saw the small red light blinking discreetly on his truck's dashboard, the hidden camera lens capturing everything. This was it. The proof. His arrogance was blinding him. Then she spoke, her voice clear and emotionless, but with a steely weight behind it. "Sir, your conduct during the stop is being recorded and will be reviewed." The officer laughed even louder, as if she'd told the funniest joke in the world. "Oh, you're going to report me? Cry to your union? Get out of here. And next time, have a man handle this for you." With that final insult, he turned and walked back to his patrol car, completely unaware of the monumental mistake he had just made. He didn't know that the woman he'd tried to humiliate wasn't just a truck driver, but the person who now held the fate of his career and his freedom in her hands. It's blood boiling, isn't it? Have you ever felt this powerless or seen someone treated this way? Tell me in the comments. I make a point of reading each and every story, because it's by sharing these experiences that we show that this isn't normal. The hunt had begun. And at that secret operations base, Elena's recording was more than just evidence. It was the key that unlocked all the other doors. In the previous months, FBI analysts had collected 87 separate complaints against the Highway Patrol. In that region, 87 stories of humiliation and extortion. There was the story of Jose, a young father who had his documents held for an hour under the guise of a check, only to be released when he offered $50 for coffee. There was the story of Mary, an Army veteran who was threatened with having her truck towed for a supposed oil leak that magically disappeared after she paid $200 in cash. They were heartbreaking stories filled with rage and helplessness. But they were just stories. No faces, no audio, no concrete evidence. Now, with Elena's video, everything changed. They had a face, Officer Miller's. They had a method. And, most importantly, they had a witness willing to go all the way. The operations leadership decided it was time to step things up a notch. They began cross-referencing data, mapping every fake checkpoint, every suspicious stop. They discovered that certain gas stations along I-80 seemed to be involved, facilitating cash payments and even making change for the corrupt cops. It was an organized system, a well-oiled extortion machine. Instead of backing down, Elena volunteered to get back on the road. She insisted she needed to continue living like the other truckers, to experience what they felt. She wanted to be the operation's eyes and ears on the ground. She chose a new route, one that passed through smaller towns but had a notoriously high rate of traffic stops. It didn't take long for her to find what she was looking for. One Wednesday morning, she was stopped again. This time, the approach was different. The officer, an older man with a fake smile on his face, patted the body of her truck and said, "Road Princess, you're light on your load today." The tactic was different, not direct humiliation, but a forced familiarity designed to disarm. Elena simply replied, "The documentation is here. No charge." The officer took the papers, but took forever to return them. He was looking at her, not at the documents, with a look that made her feel uncomfortable. The disrespect wasn't in his words, but in his silence, in his calculated delay. And then came the phrase she'd heard from other truckers. "Everything's fine here," he said, "but you know how it is." We work with risks and don't always get a raise. A contribution for water and coffee helps keep the mood. It was a veiled request for a bribe, wrapped in false camaraderie. The officer didn't know it, but by trying to extort a few bucks from a lone truck driver, he was actually confessing his crime to a federal agent, with every word recorded and sent directly to the team about to append his entire world. And she was willing to do anything to ensure each of those voices was finally heard. With the dossier of testimonies growing and the video evidence piling up, Elena received a direct communication from the plant. The investigation had progressed far enough. It was time for a controlled approach, a direct confrontation. The order was clear. Confront one of the most recurrent officers, one of those most frequently reported in abuse reports. And the chosen target was none other than Officer Miller, the same officer who weeks earlier had mocked Elena's purple truck and her presence as a woman on the road. But this time, things would be very, very different. He had no idea who he was really talking to. The meeting was strategically scheduled. An official checkpoint was set up at the entrance to a state inspection yard, an environment controlled by the FBI without the local police officer's knowledge. Only official vehicles were present. And then Elena arrived. But she didn't arrive in her purple Peterbilt. She wasn't wearing worn jeans and a jacket. For the first time since the mission began, she arrived in a black government sedan, dressed in the official uniform of an FBI special agent. Her uniform was impeccable, her badge gleaming on her belt. She was no longer the trucker. She was the law. Officer Miller had been called in for what he thought was a routine procedure review. He entered the yard's meeting room with his clipboard in hand, still with that same air of superiority, the same arrogance he displayed on the side of the road. He saw Elena sitting at the table, and a flash of recognition crossed his face, followed by confusion. "Elena, it's you," he said, her name sounding strange on his tongue. She didn't respond immediately. She simply pushed a thick folder across the table toward him. A folder filled with records, transcripts, photos taken from his videos, and the anonymous accounts of the truckers he had humiliated. Everything with dates, places, and names. All the times he had crossed the line of legality, ethics, and human dignity. He opened the first page and saw his own face, frozen in a video frame, as he mocked Elena. He laughed, a nervous, desperate laugh. He tried to hide it, asking, "What is this, a prank?" Elena's answer was cold as ice and sharp as a razor. "This, Officer Miller, is justice. And now you will speak. Or you will shut up, once and for all." The room fell completely silent. The only sound was the low hum of the fluorescent lights. Miller looked at the documents, the irrefutable evidence of his crimes. Then he looked at Elena, the woman he had scorned, now sitting before him as the embodiment of his reckoning. And in that moment, his world crumbled. Well, we're getting close to the final showdown, but hold on a second. If you're enjoying seeing justice served, do something that really helps us out. Hit that like button. It's free, and it shows YouTube that you want to see more stories like this. Already done? Great. Now, let's get back to the action. And in that moment, his world crumbled. Officer Miller's mask of arrogance shattered, revealing the small, frightened man beneath. The pride on his face turned to hesitation, the hesitation to despair, and the despair turned to tears. He lowered his head, took off his highway patrol cap, and placed it on the table. He covered his face with his hands and began to cry. They weren't crocodile tears, but the deep, shattered sobs of a man who knew he'd been caught, who knew there was no escape. He cried like a boy finally confronted with the magnitude of his mistakes, who realized he'd hurt people who didn't deserve it, that he'd crossed a line from which he couldn't return. "I messed up," he said through sobs, his voice muffled by his hands. I was tired. I was frustrated with my life. I started seeing others doing it, and I joined in. It seemed like a way to earn what the paycheck wouldn't cover. But I never thought I was destroying others. Elena remained silent, letting him speak, letting the confession out. She felt no pity, only a cold satisfaction of duty fulfilled. Miller looked at her, his eyes red and puffy. I looked at you that day, with that truck, and said what I said. To humiliate you. I wanted to demean you because I knew you were different. I knew you wouldn't bow your head. But I didn't know you were FBI. If I had known. That was when Elena interrupted him, her voice cutting through his confession like a blade. If you had known, she said, you would have treated me as protocol dictates. But what about the others? The ones who aren't FBI? The ones who only use the truck as a tool for their lives. The ones you put through embarrassment, threats, and extortion. He was crying even harder now, shaking his head, not trying to defend himself. He was crumbling inside, the weight of his actions crushing him. What happens to you from today on is no longer my problem, Elena continued. That will be decided up there. But if I had to choose, you would answer for every truck driver who cried in the passenger seat, for every woman you disrespected with your words, for every penny you collected wearing that uniform. He simply nodded silently, accepting his fate. On the way out, before closing the door, Elena looked at him one last time and said, the problem was never the uniform, Miller. The problem was the man who hid behind it. That night, the full report was forwarded to Internal Affairs in the Department of Justice. The officer would be immediately removed. The investigation would move to the judicial phase, and other names from his unit would follow. Elena's name circulated among the officers as a symbol of integrity. But for her, there was no glory, no vanity. There was only the conviction that her work was far from over. Because Miller was just one face, and the system that created him still had many others, because Miller was just one face, and the system that created him still had many others. After the official removal of Miller and several of his colleagues, a tremor ran through the spine of the State Highway Patrol. Elena's presence on the road, now a legend among truckers, became respected even by those who had previously mocked her. She still preferred the anonymity of her trucker identity, but she no longer hid when necessary. Her purple Peterbilt became a symbol of resistance and that someone was watching. Her demeanor changed. In addition to collecting evidence, she now made a point of speaking to the authorities she encountered, not as a threat, but as a reminder. One Friday morning, she stopped for a routine traffic stop. As soon as she got out of the cab, the team of officers recognized the vehicle. They looked at each other, knowing exactly who she was. There was no joking, no mocking tone. One of them even tried to justify himself before even stopping her. Mom, everything's fine here. It's just a standard inspection. Elena did what she always did. She calmly handed over the documents, looked each of them in the eye, and before leaving said what she'd been repeating for months. I'm not here to disrupt anyone's work. I respect this uniform, but I'll always remember one thing. Behind every steering wheel is a family man. A man or woman who woke up early, left their children at home, and hit the road to try to earn a living. She looked directly at the youngest officer on the team. The uniform you wear carries weight, but it's not meant to weigh down others. It's meant to protect. It's meant to welcome. Anyone who uses their authority to humiliate a worker doesn't deserve to wear this badge. No one responded. They just listened, her words hanging in the air. If you ever have children and learn that they were stopped and humiliated just for driving a truck, you'll understand what these men feel when they're treated like trash. Don't let this happen in front of you. Don't be complicit. She took back her documents, climbed into the cab, and drove off. On the radio, the truck drivers were talking. She spoke again. straight to their faces, and no one dared respond. This woman doesn't talk, she teaches. That attitude became routine. Little by little, it began to change behavior. Some officers began approaching with more respect. Others reported internally that they were reviewing their practices. But Elena wouldn't rest. She knew that all it took was one slip-up for everything to go back to the way it was before. So once a week, even when she was exhausted, she would turn on the radio on the same channel as the truck drivers and patrol cars, and her voice would ring out clearly for everyone. Good evening, this is Elena. I just wanted to remind you that respect is given before it's demanded, and that every parent who leaves home to drive a truck deserves to return with dignity. And that was the story of Agent Elena Vance. Thank you so much for sticking with us until the end. If you believe in justice and love stories where good guys win, make sure you're subscribed because we have many more to share. See you on the next road. Stay safe. That officer was, in fact, confessing his crime to a federal agent, and every word was sealing his fate. Elena didn't respond to his insinuation with words. Instead, she gave a dry smile, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. So this is what the road has become, she thought, a counter for dirty dealings. The officer frowned, sensing something was wrong, that his little game wasn't working as usual. But before he could say anything else, the radio in Elena's cab beeped, a prearranged code. A voice from dispatch sounded short and direct. Record, high priority. Confirm visually. Without the officer noticing, Elena fiddled with a small control on the dashboard, adjusting the angle of a second camera, ensuring a perfect image of his confused face. Everything was being recorded, audio and video in high definition. And then, something unexpected happened. An unknown trucker's voice came over the radio's open channel, the channel all drivers and officers used. The voice said, "I heard the driver of the purple Peterbilt stands up to any authority. Is that true?" Elena didn't hesitate. She grabbed the radio microphone and responded for all to hear, her voice ringing clear and strong throughout the stretch of highway. "I stand up to abuse, no matter who it comes from, and I will continue to stand up to it." On the other end, there was a moment of silence, and then the trucker's voice returned, simple and full of gratitude. "Thank you, on behalf of all of us." In that instant, Elena understood that her mission had become something much bigger. She was no longer just following the FBI's orders. She was representing an entire class of working men and women who were the backbone of the country and who were being broken by corruption. She had become a symbol. The news about the woman in the purple truck began to spread like wildfire. Other truckers, inspired by her courage, began speaking out. Some left anonymous notes at gas stations with dates, locations, and descriptions of the abuse they had suffered. Others, bolder, began using the radio, passing on coded information about the fake checkpoints. The dam of silence had been broken. At a gas station late one night, while filling up her truck, Elena overheard two drivers talking in hushed tones. One said, "They say the blonde in the purple Peterbilt is FBI. She's filming everything. If it's true, I hope she takes down that crew at turn 3. They're even stopping milk trucks just to extort money." The truth was spreading, and with it, danger. A tire shop attendant, an old acquaintance from the road, approached her and said in a low voice, "Someone's bothered by you, young lady. I'm telling you this because I respect you. They said they're going to scare that vigilante truck driver." Elena knew this was a warning. The beast she was poking was about to react. The beast she was prodding was about to react. And Elena was the kind of person who didn't back down when a beast bared its teeth. She advanced. That warning didn't scare her. It simply confirmed that she was on the right track. Corrupt people were afraid, and afraid people make mistakes. The next day, she adjusted her route once again, but not to avoid danger, but to head straight for it. She contacted her team at FBI headquarters and coordinated a change in the operation. From that moment on, all the evidence she collected would be duplicated and sent in real time to secure servers. If anything happened to her or her equipment, the work wouldn't be lost. It was an insurance policy for justice. The confrontation took place in a checkpoint known for being the territory of one of the officers most mentioned in the complaints. He was known for his method of finding small discrepancies in invoices, problems that didn't exist, just to create an excuse to extort money. The approach began as always. Documents, driver's license, invoice. Let's see if everything's okay. The officer's voice was deceptively professional, but his eyes scrutinized Elena with an intensity she recognized as that of a predator assessing its prey. She handed over everything. The truck was spotless, the load was light, the seal was intact. Everything was in perfect order. But as expected, after a few minutes of pretending to analyze the papers, the officer said, "Hey, everything's fine, but we found a little problem here. This invoice has a minor discrepancy. I can let it slide, but you understand this could give you a headache." It was the same old script, the same intimidation play. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "If you want to settle this right here, I'll let you. But I need you to understand, we have goals too, you know." It was time. Elena didn't respond. She simply took out her phone, which was already recording, and turned it toward the officer, showing the screen where his face was clearly visible, the red recording light flashing. "This," she said with deadly calm, "is being sent directly to FBI headquarters in Washington, including your face, your badge, and every word you just said. You'll want to continue." The change in the officer's demeanor was instantaneous. The predator became the prey. The color drained from his face, the arrogant smile turning into a panicked grimace. He tried to laugh, stammering that it was just a joke, that he only wanted to help. But the damage was done. At FBI headquarters, the video was received and validated. The voice was recognized. The image was undeniable. That officer would be removed the next day. As she continued on her way, Elena picked up the radio again, her voice echoing to every driver and officer on the frequency. "Attention, justice still exists, and she doesn't forget." That night, Elena's clandestine operation ceased to be clandestine. She was called into a video conference with FBI directors. Her field mission became a national priority. They wanted her to return to coordinate the operation from a command center, but she refused. She chose to stay on the road. Because there, between the trucks and the asphalt, was where the system's wounds were open. And she wouldn't leave until she'd stitched them all together. And she wouldn't leave until she'd stitched each one together with a thread of justice. Elena's decision to stay on the road shifted the focus of the mission. Now it wasn't just about gathering evidence against the officers, but about understanding the depth of the damage they'd caused. It was dawn when she arrived at a small gas station on the outskirts of a rural Nebraska town. The neon sign was flashing, the convenience store was closed, and only one diesel pump still worked. At the side of the dark lot, an old box truck was parked. Sitting on the ground beside, it was a middle-aged man, his shirt open at the chest and his head in his hands. Elena cautiously pulled up to her Peterbilt. Years of undercover work had taught her that the quietest scenes are often the most dangerous. She got out, approached slowly, and asked softly, "Everything okay there, buddy?" The man took a moment to raise his head. When he did, his eyes were red and watery, but not from physical pain. It was the pain of shame, a pain a working man should never feel. He said, his voice cracking, "I don't even know who you are, but thank you for asking. Today has been one of the hardest days of my life. Elena sat beside him on a small concrete wall. She said nothing, just listened, and the outburst came like a flood, unfiltered, without pride. "I'm 53 years old," he said, "almost 30 years driving this route. I've never had a problem. Everything's always in order. But today, they stopped me at a checkpoint. They said my truck looked strange. They asked me to open the trunk. There was nothing there, just empty pallets. Even so, they told me to get out. They told me to take off my seatbelt, lift my shirt, put my hands on my head. People were watching, families in their cars passing by, seeing me as a criminal." He took a deep breath, fighting back tears. "One of them even made fun of me, saying I must be too old for this, that I should get a job as a security guard at a supermarket. They treated me like trash." Alina didn't interrupt him. She waited for him to finish, then asked firmly, "Did you memorize the faces? Do you remember the license plate of the patrol car? Any names on the uniform?" The man nodded, the sadness in his eyes giving way to a flash of anger. "Now I remember everything, even their voices." Elena took a small clipboard from her cabin. She didn't reveal who she was, just jotted down every detail. "This won't stay like this," she said. "But I need you not to tell anyone about this conversation, and to continue your journey carefully." He laughed, a mirthless laugh. "I won't sleep, but I will try to forget. But if someone does something for us, it was worth it." That morning, Elena reported what had happened. The names of the officers involved were already in another investigation. The difference now was that they had a witness willing to speak, a victim whose testimony could connect the dots. That encounter solidified Elena's resolve. She began conducting anonymous interviews with other truckers, building a dossier of real stories, a document not for the media, but for the final report she would personally deliver to the FBI director. And she was willing to do anything to ensure that each of those voices would finally be heard.